Hi there, Chevy owners. Today in your 2017 Chevrolet Silverado 3500, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install TorkLift's StableLoad suspension enhancement system. These are available either in a stainless steel, which we'll be showing off today, or a black powder coat finish. And this is what our StableLoads look like when they're installed. There are extra plates that are designed to go between your lower overload spring and your leaf spring stack, which will cause your overload spring here to be applying additional pressure onto your suspension sooner than it would be before. This is going to provide you with more support here in the back. It's going to help lift up your vehicle some if you are sagging down due to heavy loads here in the back. And you have the option to turn it on and off whenever you like. There's a pin located here that keeps it either in the engaged or disengaged position. We're currently engaged. We're going to slide that pin out of there, and then if you can turn it by hand, you can go ahead and do so. On most of the time, when your vehicle's on the ground, though, this is going to be pretty hard. We've got the vehicle on a lift, which gives us additional clearance here, so we can easily do it there, but most of the time on the ground, you're going to need to place a 3/8 ratchet inside the square hole there, and then you can easily use your ratchet to disengage and re-engage your StableLoads whenever you need to. Now that we've got them disengaged, we're just going to reinsert the pin back down in the hole to hold it in place. And with them disengaged, you can see here that they're not going to provide any contact in between our lower overload spring and our leaf spring, so we're basically right back to our factory suspension with simply just sliding that guy out of the way. This is nice if you don't want to have the stiffer suspension on your truck when you're not hauling a heavy load. Because if you have this engaged when you're not hauling anything, you're likely going to notice a pretty stiff rear suspension system. It's designed to help support your heavy loads so you can use your overload springs more efficiently than you were before. You'll receive a set for the front and the rear of your overload spring for each side of the vehicle. All in all, it's a pretty quick and easy installation. Why don't you follow along with me and we'll show you how to get it installed. We'll begin our installation by lifting up the rear of our vehicle. We're here on a lift, but if you're doing this at home, you want to make sure you chalk your front wheels and then lift by the frame until your wheels come off the ground. That's going to maximize the gap you have between your leaf spring and the lower overload spring here so you can get your components installed. You can use your floor jack to lift it up and then make sure you put some jack stands underneath the frame to support it. Once you've got it up, the rubber piece here at the back, we can just push that out. I'll just give it a little push to start it, and then just use my needle nose to pull it up out of there. There's also one on the other side of the overload spring there in the front. You want to pull that one out as well. Now, if you didn't have the little rubber bushings here and there's no hole here, then you'll need to drill out a hole in that location. As long as you got the holes there, or you've already drilled it out, next thing we're going to do is measure the thickness of our spring. You'll need to know that, and we want to measure 3 inches back from the end here. So we're going to go in 3 inches and measure the thickness. Also at the same point, we want to measure the gap between our lower overload spring and our leaf spring. We're going to take the same measurements at the front of our overload spring, going 3 inches back from the edge, just like we did back here. If you do have to drill a hole, you're going to go 1 inch back from the edge, center the hole, and then drill it with a 7/16 drill bit. And the same here in the front. Now that we've taken all of our measurements, we can use that information to assemble our stack. This is our lower bracket here, and this hole is going to line up with the hole that we have in our lower overload spring. And we can put our assembly on either side of the spring. We're going to be placing ours on the outside of the spring due to clearance issues on the inside. We're going to start with the small sleeves here. You get 3 in your kit. And you want to use your measurements that you took to determine how many plates to put. If your gap was over 3/4 of an inch or over, you're going to use all 3 plates. If it's between 1/2 and 3/4, you're going to remove the smallest top plate there. And if it is between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, you're only going to use this bottom plate. On ours here, we're going to be using all 3 plates for the back part of our lower overload spring. But in the front, our gap is smaller, so we're going to be removing the top plate. We're going to assemble the back one first here. So I'm going to be using all 3 for that back one. So they're going to line up like this. Your lower plate here with the square in it is going to be offset a little bit. We can then take the smaller bolt that comes in our kit. This isn't the smallest bolt, but the second smallest. And this is just going to push right up in between these holes. Sometimes you got to thread them in there due to just some slag and stuff on the inside of them, some rough spots. So just get that up in there. And for now, we're just going to loosely secure it. Just do it hand tight. Next, we'll need to take our lower plate here, and we're going to use our stack here. We're going to connect those together. The large hole here, we're going to take the big bolt that comes in our kit. We're going to slide it down through the top there. We're then going to take washers, and you want to use amount of washers that's going to be the same thickness that your lower overload spring is, that you had measured 3 inches back. And it needs to be either the same thickness or slightly larger in order for this to properly go into position without binding up. On ours, we're using 4 in the back, and we'll be using 5 in the front. We can now take our lower piece here, and this is going to be our back one. And we know that we want our components here to be on the outside. So we're going to take our stack that we've got here, and it's going to slide down just like that. You can see here that those holes are going to line up there, and this is when it's the engaged position, and if we turn it, those holes then line up, and this is the disengaged position. That's what we're looking for right there. So we're just going to loosely install that nut on there right now. That hole here that our holes line up with on our bottom plate, we're going to take the rubber grommet that comes included with it, and we're just going to stuff that down inside that hole. Come out the other side. Once you've got that grommet in there, we're just going to leave it in the disengaged position, which is going to be like that. Our pin then is going to slide down through that slot there, through our grommet, and then we can go ahead and secure it here. We'll do the same thing to assemble our front stack. Just want to keep in mind you want to use that gap measurement to determine how many plates. Our front stack's not going to have this top one. Now that we've got it all loosely assembled, we can go back and tighten down our hardware. We're going to use a 15mm socket and wrench to tighten down that small bolt. And then we're going to use a 19mm socket and wrench to tighten down our large bolt. When we go to tighten this one down, it is important that it remains somewhat loose because we need to be able to pivot this through this bolt. That's why it's a nylon locking nut, so we can choose the amount of tightness on it. We pretty much just want to get it tightened down to eliminate the rattles, but we need it to be able to turn. So that's a little bit still too loose there, so we'll snug it up just a little bit more. And that feels pretty good right there. It's not, doesn't have any rattles, it's not slopping up and down, but we could still pivot it if we need to. It's not going all the way because we got the pin in, but you should be able to feel it just like that. Then using the bolts with the low profile hex head, you see how thin it is? Those are going to slide down through the holes in our lower overload spring. Sometimes the gap may be too small to get it in there, so you may need to use a pry bar to spread it apart. Our front's pretty snug, so we're just going to slide our pry bar in there, give her a tug down, and then just carefully drop that down in there. We can then take the stacks that we had prepared, and we're going to put them in place. Slide it over your bolt, and then put a nylon locking nut on after it. We also have some small holes here on the outside on our bottom plate. These are used to keep this from pivoting when it's on there. The holes you're going to use is going to depend on the width of your overload spring, so you'll want to refer to your instructions for that. On ours, due to it being so wide, we're at the widest width that's acceptable with the StableLoads. We're only going to be placing one in the farthest one out on the opposite side of our pin there. So we're just going to slide this up through the bottom and then place our nut on the top. We can then come back and tighten these down. The small bolt will tighten down with an 11mm socket and wrench. And then the brass color bolt that we drop down, we'll use a 16mm socket and wrench. And you can see here why we had chose to put this on the outside, because you can flop it. This always needs to be towards the inside, how we've got it here. So you can flip this over, and you could have put it on the inside, but due to our exhaust being here, it doesn't have the clearance. So that's why we chose the outside. That's really all you want to look at when determining if this goes on the outside or inside, is am I going to be hitting anything? Now that we got this one snugged on here, the one on the other side is going to snug down the exact same way. And then we can repeat these same procedures over on the other side of the vehicle to complete that side. And that completes our look at TorkLift's StableLoad rear suspension enhancement system on our 2017 Chevrolet Silverado 3500.